This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Whisper Room, Eventide Audio, Spectra 1964, and Roswell Pro Audio. So get ready to rock.
I went to a Guitar Center and went to the acoustic room, and the guy approached me and said, hey, I have a decent home studio. Would you like to come and record? So I went out and recorded, and that's when the aha moment for me was like, oh my gosh, there's people that do this for a living. You said something similar before. It's like, I should have known that, back then, that, like people record things for a living. That's how we hear things on, radio. But I never even thought about it.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. This episode is sponsored by OWC, Otherworld Computing, which you can find at OWC.com, your trusted source for memory and speed upgrades, DIY installs, and used Macs for your studio. Let OWC focus on keeping your studio Mac in killer condition so that you can focus on making great music. Why ditch your existing Mac when you can take your studio far into the future with OWC? Learn more at OWC.com and learn how you can supercharge your studio Mac. The speed to create, the capacity to dream. Find out how awesome your Mac can be at OWC. The Spectra 1964 101 amplifier provides unequaled headroom, low noise, and a linear output, irrespective of transient audio peaks. In the studio, this means that critical details from your microphone get through to your DAW. The 101 was used by Tom Dowd, Muscle Shoals, Stax Studios, and The Record Plant on records by ZZ Top, Aerosmith, Bruce Springsteen, and John Lennon. Today, Spectra 1964 brings that same incredible sound to your studio with the STX 100 mic pre. Learn more at Spectra1964.com. What do Michael Brower, Joe Ciccarelli, Dave Pensato, and George Massenburg all have in common? They all have great things to say about Eventide. Originating in a New York City basement in 1971 with the original Instant Phaser and H910 harmonizer, Eventide continues to transform the sound of music with the iconic H9000 harmonizer, visionary guitar effects like the H9 pedal, and now a whole suite of incredible plugins for your studio. Go to eventide.com to learn more or click the link in the show notes below. If you're sick of bothering the neighbors when you are trying to record your music or ruining your recordings with outside noises, but you're not ready to spend a ton of money on permanent studio construction yet, then consider getting a Whisper Room ISO booth for your studio. Whisper Room offers the instant solution for a comfortable, quiet, ventilated, portable ISO booth with easy line of sight for recording vocals, guitar amps, or even drums. Get 10% off the 4x4 or 4x6 booth when you mention Recording Studio Rockstars. Go to whisperroom.com or click the link in the show notes below. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Casey Barker, an Ohio native who's been living and working in the Nashville area for the last 12 years. Casey is a record producer and mixer, a supervising sound editor and re-recording mixer for television and film, as well as the owner and founder of modernmusicbusiness.com, which is a website dedicated to showing you how to successfully obtain your dream career in the entertainment business. That's pretty good, man. I like that, a dream career. Yeah. I also want to give a shout out to Ted Skolitz, a previous guest on the podcast, for making the introduction. Ted, you rock. Thanks, man. And please welcome Casey Barker to Recording Studio Rockstars. Casey, you ready to rock, dude?
Man, I am ready to rock. Thank you so much for having me.
Glad to have you here on the show, and it's nice to meet you. I think we actually did meet in person, you were saying, but you know how the music business is. We meet so many people so quickly. Sometimes we have to, circle back.
It was a minute. It was a minute ago. I think it was only 2 years into my career. So it's been probably a decade.
Well, it's awesome, man. It looks like you've done some really great stuff. Tell us more about how you got started out in recording and what you're doing now. Give us the brief synopsis of bringing us up to the present.
Yeah, man. Yeah, the quick backstory. I moved to Nashville in 2007 after graduating from Full Sail with a recording arts degree. And I did an internship at Paragon Studios for a year. And that kind of laid the groundwork of the technical know-how and just kind of catching up on the skills that school doesn't teach you.
Yeah, like a lot of them.
Like pretty much everything, yeah. And after that, I set off on my own journey, working with, a lot of people. Some were good, some were bad. The first gig that I got with a producer went really south. The guy was just, kind of a shyster and very unethical. He actually got deported out of the country. It was that bad. Wow. He was here on a visa and got deported out of the country. And so I just continued to move on and worked my way and made sure that I was valuable to people, and was the assistant for several different people. Got familiar in the commercial rooms around town here in Nashville, and became an incredible editor. That's kind of how I started. Really, it was actually by being a really good editor, tuning vocals, doing beat detective stuff, drum samples.
I'm going to give it a name for it. Increditing.
Yeah.
We'll just conjoin the two words right there.
Right. And so I did a lot of that kind of work for a while until I just got to the point where, you have your goals and your dreams, and it wasn't to be an editor for my entire career. And so I started moving into other positions where I had opportunities to be in the hot seat. And so I'd say it was probably in 2010, I started working with Randy Poole as his assistant, and he was doing a lot of tracking, a ton of tracking. And that's where I started. I already had a lot of experience on an SSL because of my time at Paragon and because of how great that internship was. I was able to actually get a lot of experience on that console. Mm-hmm. And so I became an incredible asset to Randy because of that. And I got to just move around a lot of the rooms around Nashville, get to know them really well. So I was assisting a ton. And that just, allowed me to move my way up to become more confident in the chair, more confident as a first engineer. And all the while I was, continuing to mix anything I could get my hands on. So I was developing myself as a mix engineer. And then in 2013, I got the opportunity to mix VeggieTales for DreamWorks and Netflix for 7 seasons. It kind of just fell in my lap. And so that's kind of where the launch pad for my post-production career kicked off. What
is more remarkable, mixing 7 seasons for VeggieTales or actually watching 7 seasons for VeggieTales?
Definitely mixing it. There's nothing, for me now especially, there's absolutely nothing remarkable about watching 7 seasons of that show. Tell the rock stars what VeggieTales is, because not everybody's seen it. Yeah, VeggieTales is kind of an iconic faith-based animated kids series. Back in the day, when it was solely Big Idea, they primarily released DVDs, but it really has become iconic in the Christian community, very popular. And so, long story short, DreamWorks acquired a company that owned Big Idea, and they were kind of like, "Oh, I guess we acquired this asset. What do we do with this?" And Netflix and DreamWorks decided to give it a refresh and another 7 seasons and an exclusive Netflix go. So
that's great. So it was like a children's animated show that had basically a positive message in every episode, right?
That's correct. Yeah, it was kind of central. Each episode was kind of centralized on one piece of scripture, and they kind of wrapped and told an entire story around that one central theme.
Well, that's fascinating. Do you remember a show from back when I was growing up? Not that you were necessarily there when I was growing up, but called David and Goliath. Did you ever hear about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
With the claymation characters, and it was all this positive message stuff. It was great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was incredibly wild for me because I grew up. I was a little bit older. I was kind of coming out of that age group when VeggieTales was really, really popular, but I was still very much aware of that show, especially growing up in a Christian home. So for me, it was incredibly strange to be the guy mixing the show and having Mike Naraki, and the creators and the founders sitting down and listening to my work.
Yeah, no doubt.
It was, and especially because now the show they're doing a couple things with it now, but really kind of the end of that Netflix run really felt like the end. And so to have Mike Naraki sit down and watch, kind of what was the final episode, I'm like, man, we're literally lowering this show down into its grave. And it's just a show that I grew up watching. It was just a very surreal moment.
Wow. Well, my brother went through a stretch as a musician where he actually got the opportunity to work with Little Airplane and Company, which made, what was I actually forgot the name of the first one. It was like something Pets or something like that. But then he made a show called Third and Bird. So through him, I got to hear these stories about, the process of composing and recording music. And, he wasn't strictly in a mixing capacity, but he was doing the composition, but just that experience of working in the television production business. And it's pretty amazing. I mean, it's pretty wild. And what you described about having the creators in the room with you, it can be a real pressure cooker situation.
It's like nothing I've ever experienced in the music industry, honestly. I can't say that. There was, when I'm tracking 32 players, orchestra players on the floor at Ocean Way, and I know that the day is costing the client somewhere around $30 to $40 a minute. That gets a little tense. You can't waste time there. But I just wrapped up a feature-length film for Sony Pictures called Patsy and Loretta, and it aired on Lifetime. And I should send you the picture sometime. But there's literally 9 people in the back of the room watching you mix the entire day for 10 hours a day.
Wow! And
they're all chefs in their own right, and so they're all kind of calling out the things that they want, and and it's like, man, you've literally got a room full of major TV and film network executives and producers and directors, and it's just it is very much a high pressure situation.
As engineers, that's why we get a bald spot on the back of our head eventually.
That's
because people are just staring at the back of your head for decades.
That's exactly it.
It's funny that you bring that up because I remember that very distinctly. I'm far more used to it now, although it can still be distracting pretty easily. But I remember having to go through this transition of learning to be comfortable with people. You just feel like people are watching your every move. And not only that, but most of the time it's pretty boring.
I agree. And for me, it actually affects the way that I work. Because I don't think I've grown the nads to just, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and I'm going to let you correct me later if you don't like it. It's kind of, there's always that thing of like, am I doing what I want them? Am I doing what they want me to do? And that's it's really a hard thing to kind of get over when you got a bunch of people, watching over your shoulder the entire time.
Yeah, it's just, it's distracting too, because you're trying to do something really good, but the last thing you need is to be distracted from being focused, So what are some things that you remember figuring out as far as allowing you to not be distracted when you've got that kind of pressure cooker situation?
Yeah, it was, this happened actually out of kind of a point of failure for me. And it happened in the VeggieTales, in the early stages of the VeggieTales series. Obviously I felt very good in the chair in the music world. I had already had 7 years of experience under my 6 years of experience under my belt in the music world, sitting in the chair. I was very comfortable there, but I literally got dropped into the position of being a mixer for, essentially they flew DreamWorks executives out for the first mix. And I was very inexperienced in the post-production world. And after a couple of episodes, they could sense that I was really on edge, that I was not confident in the chair. And so
they doubled down on the pressure.
Well, yeah. So what I found out through, through the editor of the show was that Doug Tenable, one of the directors on the show, had basically said after the show, like, man, we're not sure about this Casey guy. Like,
nice. You need to get you need a little plaque in your house, because obviously you've gotten past that, but you need a little plaque that just says, "Man, we're not sure about this case.
We're not sure about this case." Yeah, I mean that's kind of the story of my life, really. I mean, I really should. I should just hang it up and put it in a frame. Not sure about this Casey guy, but basically what he said was, we hired him because we expect that he knows what he's doing, and when we ask him to make a change, he's looking back for our approval.
Right.
And at the time I thought I was doing the right thing. Like, wanted to make sure that they were happy. It came out of that action, kind of came out of the best of intentions from my perspective, but from them, it showed a lack of confidence.
Yeah. It's such a classic struggle. It's that learning process of learning to include the people you're working with, but not in every little nook and cranny and detail of what you're doing. You have to learn to include them at the right moments, confidently, I guess.
And that took a while for me to figure out, to be completely honest, is where do I just go, you know what, I'm the professional, that's why they hired me, and where do I need to be sensitive to actually what they have to say about this? And so, I took that to heart. And so the next episode, they would say, "Hey, just do this." And I would do it, and I wouldn't even look back at them. I go, "Okay, next note."
Yeah.
And that changed, it literally changed everything.
Well, I think partly it's the experience of learning to be confident in solutions that you can provide. So for example, after you've solved a bunch of things on your recording journey, you begin to know that, okay, if this problem comes along, here's the solution. So I'll just go do it. And when it's done, it's done. And then it's like, you guys, did I get it? If not, great, we'll do it again. We'll try something different. Rather than like, I remember like dialing in a sound for a musician in the studio, a guitar player or something like that. And you're just looking at them like look, right there, right there, right there, right there, right there. And like, that doesn't work.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Well, very cool. So one of the things I like to ask guests on the show is to share an inspirational quote or share some bit of, message that they got from somebody that really inspired them along the way. Do you have anything you want to share with us?
Oh man, I mean, I can do a lot of quotes because I like to read books. And right now I'm definitely in a mode of my life where I'm looking to behavior modification.
Yes.
If that makes any sense, where things that people say that fundamentally change the way that you move forward. And I've definitely been also looking at the business side of the industry too.
Yeah.
Because I feel it's a part that a lot of people are lacking with kind of the collapsing record label environment that we live, where everybody's kind of an independent artist now for the most part. I feel like the business side is what a lot of us are losing.
Yeah, like an Aero mattress just being deflated while you're laying.
Yeah, yeah. It's when these record labels went down, so too did the people go away that were in charge of being your marketing department and treating your art like a product to sell.
Yeah.
And this is an art, this is an area that I think a lot of artists have lost, is they want to think so purely about their art, which I love, which is obviously incredible. But unless you never plan on selling and making any money off of what your art is, then you've got to at some point think of your art as a product.
Yeah, I agree.
So all that to say, I'm a big fan. I don't know if you've ever read the book of Start With Why by Simon Sinek.
No, not yet, but I'm writing it down right now. Start with why.
It's incredible. And he talks about Apple a lot and just about the influence of why they did so well as a company. And one of his quotes is, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And what you do simply proves what you believe.
Nice, man. I like that.
And especially if you're looking at from the musician, the artist world, I think a lot of artists are chasing something rather than being true to what they believe and really projecting why they're doing what they're doing rather than what they're doing.
Yeah, that's great advice. I was immediately thinking about analogies, but it just reminds you, almost within that is the concept of brand.
Yeah.
because why you do stuff is your mission statement. And, we got to be cautious about this conversation because as musicians and as artists and as engineers and producers, we want to embrace the business side so that we can thrive at doing this. But this isn't strictly, we're not necessarily entrepreneurs that are just going out to, create startups or something like that.
Right.
But the concept of brand is that, why you do it. It's that recognition that if somebody comes to work with Casey, at your studio, that you're gonna there's a why and an experience that accompanies that makes them feel very confident about it.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. There's there's definitely that aspect of that should really ooze through everything that they do. And the thing is, the artists that I know, even the independent artists that I know that are doing incredibly well, you can see that in everything that they do.
Yeah. So maybe let's talk about that a little bit, because I do think that the artist aspect is always a fascinating topic, because when you think about creation and music and you think about the core of business concept that says, build an audience, get to know them, figure out how you can serve them and what you can do to help them. And then you're like, okay, but how do I write a song about you stepped on my toes and you poked me in the eye and my heart is broken. That was about how do I write this personal song, but somehow also serve and help and deliver to the audience. It's like, how are you solving an audience's pain point, for example?
Yeah. And that's an incredible question. And I think that really comes down to finding, I think everybody has a niche of some sort. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a background and everybody has something to say. Yeah. And finding the people who resonate the most with what you have to say. I just wrapped up an interview. It was like a 36-minute interview, and I don't know that I can say who the client is. That probably wouldn't be smart. But the interview was with Chris Martin from Coldplay. Cool. And one thing that he was talking about in this interview was being absolutely true to yourself, but also essentially kind of going out to the universe and saying, use me the way that you need me, because you've gifted me with this art. Nice. You've gifted me with this ability. And I really love that, because I think he's totally staying true to who he is, but there is this conscious mindset, this active mindset of, I'm here to serve you. I'm here for the people who consume what I do. And I think that's maybe where that delicate balance is. Yeah, is not selling out to yourself, but really being actively searching for the people who resonate with who you are and what you have to say and what you want to do with your art.
Yeah, it's a really funny, almost ironic conundrum to just throw a couple of words out there, big words. It's this idea of serving people by being all about them, but remembering and learning that the best way for you to serve them is to be all about yourself. In other words, be really true to yourself in the same way that you learn to be confident and just go do the job and turn around and deliver it as, this is my best way to solve the problem you just presented to me, rather than doubting every step of the way and making it difficult for the people you're serving by, constantly making them check in on your work or comment on or not really letting them focus on what they need to focus on.
Yeah, and I certainly think it just depends on where the artist is at in their walk. I mean, there's a lot of people I know that they make art, they make music, they make records because they want it for them. Right. And at that point, you don't have to worry about any of that. Like it is literally just an expression for them. Something that they can have, that they said that they've done, that they've conquered, that, and they don't necessarily care if anybody buys or consumes any of it. Right. So for them, that doesn't really apply. But I think for everyone else who is searching for an audience, who is searching for a fan base and a tribe, the stuff that you're making is not doing any good to anybody if no one's consuming it. Yeah. And I think that's the grand message is nothing that we buy in this world, nobody's making these products for themselves. They're making them for us.
I did a mic shootout for my vocals in the studio and tried 20 different microphones from the Shure SM7 to a vintage Neumann U67, but was impressed that my favorite of all was the Roswell Pro Audio Delphos 2 large diaphragm condenser. Handcrafted in California, Roswell Mics brings you inspired design and attention to detail to help you capture a gorgeous vintage sound without the vintage price tag. Check out their beautiful microphones, including the Mini K47 for only $349 at RoswellProAudio.com. Well, again, I feel like I'm just reiterating what you're saying, but the idea of making music just the way you want to make it, only the way you want to make it, and you don't care at all if anybody listens to it, that's sort of outside of the equation of what we're talking about, because we're talking about making music, whether you're the artist or the producer or the engineer in the studio, that people will want to listen to. And so it's always this interesting balance because, you want to find something that's genuine, where people can really understand, why you do it. But you want people to be able to accept it.
Yeah, and I'd love to get your 2 cents on it too, because that's something that I certainly struggle at from the producer, engineer, mixer standpoint, is when I'm faced with an artist who approaches me and you can always have that sense of like, this person does not have it. This is going nowhere.
Right.
And this is a paycheck essentially. But I'm just wondering about your thoughts. What are your thoughts on, dealing with people like that, where that they're going to have no reach, that they don't have this thing? Does that deflate the experience for you at all, or no?
Well, it certainly can, and I've struggled with all the things you might expect in the past.
Mm-hmm.
But I find that as a producer, as an engineer, it's my responsibility to offer them any help. And so, just in the act of helping that artist, even if that artist isn't going to connect with their audience, you're already in a service role. You're already serving somebody. So it's kind of like it's kind of win-win, in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
So you're already helping somebody out, and that's key. If you can help one person really well, that's a pretty big deal, actually, if you can help somebody feel great about themselves and their music, whether or not they connect with an audience. 2 is when you are aware of things where you feel like you can step in and say, you know what? I want to suggest something to you. Check out how the bass isn't connecting with the kick drum on the drums here. But if you guys do that, look at how powerful that can be. And you might maybe explain it a little bit, or just give them some insights, or you say, you know what? I am noticing that on this particular note, because of the way you're holding your throat, or because of how high it is, it's causing you to wobble in a way that's distracting to me listening. So, what if you looked for a different note or something like that? Those can be really helpful for the artist, but at the same time, you also have to know when to just go like, great, I without derailing this artist or their experience and enjoyment of the process of making their art.
Right.
I gave them a few tools and a few tips to help them, and beyond that, it's out of my hands. It's out of both of our hands. Like literally,
absolutely. Yeah.
If the artist isn't there yet, they're literally just on the path there because they're even making their art.
Right. Yeah, I love that. It's perfect.
So I do have one thought though that sparked when you were talking about connecting with the audience and being genuine to yourself, but also giving the audience something that they can really use. And I know we're sort of conflating the production and the songwriting, but why not? I mean, it's what we do. We do the whole thing all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I went to a songwriting clinic with a guy named Pat Pattison, and he teaches lyric writing. And one of the things he taught at that I thought was really fascinating was this idea of show, don't tell in your lyric. And what that essentially boils down to meaning is describe things in a way that sort of touch on the 5 senses in the way that you describe what's personal to you, rather than just saying like, I dated you, you broke up with me, it broke my heart.
Right.
It's like, I saw you, it was the hugs were magnificent.
Right.
I wanted to stab myself, whatever it is.
Right.
I don't know what the lyric example is, but, using visual elements to describe, because what that can do for the listener is it can express what you're trying to say, but the visual or the touch, smell, taste, physical sensation, however you're describing it in that way, whoever listens to it, then now they take that and they picture it. They picture their feet in the water on the sandy beach, and they immediately put it in their own understanding. And it's like, what does it mean to them? So I don't know if I'm being too meta and outside on this, but
no, it makes sense. Like, you can't be too literal with the way that you present. It's kind of like presenting someone the gift without the wrapping paper on. It's like, oh, that's what that is.
Yeah.
Rather than them going, oh, what is this? What
Yeah, exactly. And but also it's just saying like, I'm going to tell you my personal story in my music, but I'm going to do it in a way that allows you to own it when you listen to it. So now it's your personal experience in this music. And then if your audience connects with that music and they say, oh my God, that totally is meaningful to me. Like a great lyric, there was a band out of St. Louis, it's been too long. It might have been Nadine. And they had a lyric that just said, this house just echoes. And I was like, oh my God, that just hits me right in the heart. After a breakup, I just pictured like the empty house, and it was so meaningful. And it's that kind of, I know we're being very lyrics centric here, but it's creating in such a way that it's open to interpretation so that the audience can totally make it their own.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, again, go back to referencing this interview that I just wrapped, that I just finished mixing with Chris Martin. He talked in that interview about his relationship with Bruce Springsteen, and
cool.
And yeah, and how Bruce said something to the lines of, like never give away the meaning of the song. Like, who are we as the artist to give them give away the interpretation to them? Like, let them interpret them on their own.
Yeah, that's great. I like that.
Which I thought that's great.
It's almost implicit in that. Don't give it away. Let the audience take it from you.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I thought that was a great little piece of advice.
That's very cool.
And things I've seen artists do that, where they're like, the band interview, a lot of people think it's this, like, oh no, it's this. And it's like, you should have just left that one alone.
Right. Don't say, a lot of our favorite artists never really tell you what it's about. They're always like, that's why it's appealing to us when an artist is all mysterious.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I think Mystique has a big draw. For sure.
I did have the honor of recording a guy named Leo Cannellan many years ago, and he was the poet laureate of Connecticut, originally from Maine. And it was actually poetry that were recorded and then turned into music. But he told me something way back then. He said, when you make a creation, you put it out there, it's not yours anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about copyright here, but he's talking about like the art of it is no longer yours. It now belongs to the listener, and it belongs in their interpretation. And that really struck me.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. It's incredible.
What do you think? I mean, if we're going to follow this analogy for just a moment, what do you think that could mean to us in terms of production or engineering? I mean, how do we not say the obvious, or how do we not give it away when we're producing and engineering?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe my answer to that would be is there's a delicate balance of where we step in and where we stay out of the way. And I think maybe one of the biggest sins that some producers, and I myself have been guilty of, is that we try to put too much of our own fingerprint on it.
Yeah.
And, and in that, I think we are maybe taking some of that away. We're taking the reins over on something that we're really there to be a guide and an aid on, and not necessarily taking over the reins. So I don't know if that's an acceptable answer or not, but I feel like that's
a great answer. And it immediately makes me think of a retort to that, which is like, what about the records where there's bold production moves on it and we love it? And why can that coexist with production and engineering that is being transparent to the artist?
Yeah, I think that really would depend on your bond with the artist.
Yeah.
Because at that point, if they're saying jump on board, then you're no longer taking away.
Wait, so we're on the party train now?
We are.
Oh no, the bus. Sorry, the tour bus.
Yeah. Sign me up.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like the idea of maybe when I'm even imagining the bold production, that's really great engineering and production that is creating a portal through which the artist can express themselves really boldly.
Yeah. I mean, I think and it's something I'm still learning, is in the art of being a great producer, is figuring out where you're stepping in that is an augmentation of their expression rather than, a takeover.
Yeah, I like that. Augmentation, not a takeover. This is not a hostile takeover.
Right. And it's, again, I think it's some of it, sadly, is a result of the environment that we're in. I can't tell you how many times I've had an artist come to me with just a shell of a song, and they expect me to finish it for them, and I'm like, that's not my role,
right?
Like that's not, and I don't know what to do about that, quite honestly.
Well, it depends on when they're bringing it to you. Are they bringing it to you when you're in the capacity of a mixer?
Like in the early stages, like pre-production.
Early stages, okay, pre-production.
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually working with an artist that we're sort of in that situation, and I do remember hearing early on about Rick Rubin. His technique of, at least we hear anecdotes all the time, so it's partly like who cares if it's true or not. But I remember hearing that Rick Rubin, because we just love stories in the studio. That Rick would start with a band, and they wouldn't even go into the studio until they were ready. Honestly, saying it out loud, that sounds so obvious, but it's not that obvious in terms of our experience, because a lot of times we just go into the studio and then we find out if we're ready.
Right.
But it was that idea that said, like, if the songs aren't there, don't go into the studio yet. Just keep going back to the drawing board. Keep working on the songs. And so I feel like that's kind of the answer to what you just said. It's like the artist who isn't ready in the studio. There's never anything wrong with not being ready. There's only something wrong or like mistimed about showing up at the wrong part of the process when you're not ready, when you need to be back at the first part of the process.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how many people I run into now that do that. I think a lot of artists, at least that I'm running into, they want to develop the song from scratch in the studio. Yeah.
Well, as an engineer or a producer, you got to be pretty patient. And it took me a long time to learn that that's what I was experiencing.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to recognize, oh, this artist is totally just writing in the studio while I have to sit here through that. And it took me a long time to get to a point where I was like, ooh, I hate doing that. I don't want to do that at all,
Right. Well, I mean, it's, we hear that, the days where, they used to, block out entire months, in a studio.
Dude, I spent years on records.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But, to what you're saying though, hopefully when an artist is blocking out a studio for a month or 2 months, they're ready to go. They're actually spending that time creating what they've prepared for.
Right. It's the preparation that got you ready to be there. So now, just recognizing that fact, the unreadiness is not unwelcome. It's just welcome at long before you hit the studio.
Yeah.
That's the right time to be unready. And then you figure out what's unready about the song or the arrangement. And you take what time you need to sort that out. Deadlines still help, but take the time to just like explore. Well, what if we did this different lyric here? What if we did this different lyric here? Okay, we're done for the day. We don't have a complete song. It's okay. We're done for the day. We'll come back to it again, in the next songwriting session.
Yeah.
And then with the band, in the pre-production stages, it's like, yeah, we're not, we might set up a couple of mics just so that we can listen back and clearly hear what the kick and snare are doing and the vocal or the whatever. But we're not setting up for a recording session right now. We don't care about the recording of this thing. We already know it's not ready.
Right.
We just want to capture the ideas and start sorting out like, hey, are the guitars playing together? Are you guys playing chords that go together? Or, does the bass go with this? Is this supporting, the vocal and lifting the song where it needs to be?
Yeah. It's so good.
Yeah. Well, so let's see. What else do I want to ask you about? How about sharing? You kind of did, but I'd like to ask also if you want to share a story about an important failure in the studio or something that felt like a real nightmare that turned into a great learning experience for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, I could go on forever about how I have failed. No, yeah, seriously though, I would say there's a couple that come out to mind. Definitely. One was while I was working on the Journey record. And again, it was still a little earlier on in my career. I think it was year 3 or so into my career. I was working on the Journey record. And here's the thing is like things were not going well at home. I married young. My wife and I were both trying to figure out what this industry was really about. I had a pretty good idea, but my wife was nowhere near prepared, no matter how much I tried.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this is our passion, and it's just not fair to anybody else.
It's right, yeah. And the thing is, what was happening is the stress of life and home. I was bringing that into the studio with me, And here I was working with probably one of the bigger names that I would work on in my career. I mean, Journey's a pretty big band, and
It's true.
While I don't know that anyone knew it, I knew that my attitude and what I was bringing to the studio was resulting in me not producing the best work.
Right.
And so one thing I learned through that process is whatever I have to do, I need to figure out some way to leave whatever is going on and leave that at the door when I come to the studio. Or whenever I sit down, because it's not fair to my client if, they're hiring me because they're expecting me to do my best work.
Yeah.
And it's not fair to them if I'm not producing my best work because of elements that are outside of their control.
Absolutely. I've been there myself. I've brought all kinds of home frustrations right into the studio, and I've done it enough times to recognize just how badly it was messing things up.
Yeah. Yeah. Another good one was.
Well, can I put a twist on that?
Oh, please, yeah.
So I think the complete cycle of that is also learning how to prepare for returning home after the studio.
Oh, that's good.
It's a complete. It's like you need to have a transition between home going into the studio so that you're focused in the studio, and you need to have a transition. That's a hard learning one. It was for me. After studio time, before you're ready to go home. I used to make the mistake of like straight from work, try and hop on the phone with my wife, my ex-wife now, a decade ago. But that's probably a good example of one of the reasons why that didn't work. And other times too, I just noticed that I need to have a buffer zone between work and really being ready to interact with other people. You kind of need some me time.
Yeah, that's so good. And thinking back in those situations, I certainly did not do that.
No, because we always felt pressured for time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was, I got to get back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you come back, dragging all the stuff back home with you.
So what are some ways that you would recommend people do find those buffers on the way in and on the way out?
I think what I've figured out is that a lot of times I'll just get in the studio or in my room, and I will literally just take time just to clear the air and focus on what I need to do that day and why I'm there in the first place. And that helps me recalibrate and concentrate back on the task that is immediately in front of me. When I take that minute, I'm able to kind of push any of the frustration out the door or out of my mind. And it's again, I think it's just focusing on the client who is trusting you with their work, with their project. But I mean, that can be a lot of things. That can be the car ride in. That could be, listening, jamming out to music, for a little while, like a lot of times I'll do that. Especially, again, on days where, I'm tracking like a country record, I would go in and like, I knew who the artist was. I knew kind of what their style was. And I would put in some music that was very similar to what that was going to be that day.
Yeah.
Just to get me calibrated, with what I'm going to be doing that day. So I think there's a lot of ways of doing it.
I think, it's a silly memory, but I remember actually escaping to the bathroom and then getting a chance to read Tape Op for a moment, as like an escape from everything. Because sometimes studios are like literally like there is nowhere to get away from everybody in some studios.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
All right. TMI.
Yeah. Hey man, Tape Op's a great magazine.
Oh yeah, there you go.
So that doesn't matter where you're reading it. Another one I could think of was the first day that I assisted for Randy Poole. To my defense, he had not given me a very thorough explanation of the kind of clientele that he was tracking on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. But this was very much in the Christian choral print realm of the industry. And so the first day that I sat down as an assistant, I had a composer drop a stack of sheet music right in front of me. And Randy looks at me and goes, all right, I need you to get numbers for Pro Tools. Because the way that composers write on sheet music, they're, it's, there's going to be a million repeats and codas and DSs and all this kind of stuff. It's bar 96. And as soon as that bar repeats on paper and goes back to page 1, well, Pro Tools doesn't work that way.
Right.
The bar marker keeps going in a linear fashion. And so here I am, years separated from regularly reading sheet music, and I botched the entire day. I mean, it was a nightmare. Full disclosure, I went home, crying. I went, because this was like my new gig. Again, like this was kind of like a new regular thing of income for me, or was supposed to be. Yeah. And I remember talking to my wife. I'm like, I just bombed I just bombed this. Like there's no way. If I were him, I would not call me back.
Wow.
It was so embarrassing. And the thing is that I spoke with him the next day, and I love Randy Poole to death. Like I think he's been probably, as far as a mentor in my life and in this industry, I think he's been easily probably the biggest influence in my career. And we're both from the North. I'm from Ohio. He's from Detroit. And so we've both got this very straight, we don't have that Southern sweetness in us at all, And so I talked to him on the phone the next day, and he's like, yeah, that felt like crap, didn't it? I was like, yeah, it really did. He's like, I'm going to trust that you're not going to subject yourself to feeling like that again.
Nice. Well done.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think he knew that I was probably going to bomb this. But he wasn't going to shelter me from that.
Right.
And feeling that. And, I studied like crazy. And the next time I was in there, I killed it.
Well, there's nothing as motivating as your own self-drive not to screw up again,
Absolutely.
And the only way you get that drive is by having experienced just how bad it was to screw up.
Yeah, and I think it's healthy that we have people around us who let us feel that and don't protect us from that.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think maybe with the changing society and personalities and dynamics of our culture, I think that there's people that are having a harder time with that.
You're making me feel much better about my parenting now. Because I think of all the times my daughter would say, Daddy, can you go up and ask them for something at the counter of the restaurant? I'd be like, no, you can go do it.
Yeah, right.
Just get her comfortable with getting up there and asking an awkward question to a grown-up.
There's nothing better for most of us than to spend a little time getting our butts kicked in our career.
Yeah.
I've never been more driven to succeed than after a monumental failure.
So what's one of the ways that you recover from a failure like that? Because I feel them all the time. And I know sometimes that's the challenge is you're feeling like crap about what's going on. You're feeling like crap about what you're doing. But maybe you sort of know at this point, I know that I have to go through this because it will get better or something. Any tips for just kind of not giving up in that moment?
Well, I mean, the first thing that I do after something like that is take an assessment. I'm a firm believer that not all of us are made for everything. I think a lot of us are made for a lot of things. So the first thing I do is I take an honest assessment. And I can give you an example from recently as well is, in my new entrepreneurial pursuits, I went out to supper with some very high earning, highly entrepreneurial people who looked over some of my stuff and they're like, nope, nope, you're not there.
Yeah.
Like the core is good, but you're not delivering the message properly.
Nice.
And I had to spend some time going, okay, I just got my butt kicked. I need to sit back and go, am I trying to step into a role that I'm actually not suited for?
Oh yeah. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. That's called imposter syndrome.
I love that. And so that's what I do. And then after that, if I figured out that no, I have some learning to do. Then the next thing I do is, okay, I know I'm suited for this. I know I'm made for this. This is where I screwed up. And now I'm just going to focus on fixing this key area.
Nice.
And and then take it one step at a time from there.
It sounds like those entrepreneurs just sent you back to the writing room.
Yeah, it's one. Yeah. And I literally stayed up and tweaked my website till 2 a.m. that night.
Nice.
We can do that in the studio. We can do that in our songwriting. We can do that in our producing. The second that someone, an artist fires us for whatever, we're not producing it the way that they want, or, we couldn't get the mix where they want it to be. It's assess. Am I supposed to be doing this? If the answer is yes, then that's all the validation you need.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's just, if the answer is yes, that I'm made for this, then the next step is what problem do I need to fix? What area do I need to improve? And that's where you move forward.
Awesome. Well, that's some great insight. We're going to take a break now just for a moment. We'll come back in for the jam session. Casey, great stuff we're talking about here. Rockstars, a reminder that you can find links to what we're talking about in the show notes, including a bunch of great resources for you that are going to help you do things like build your studio, figure out how to be more productive and things like that. And we'll come back in and let you know more about that in just a minute for the jam session. So click through on your mobile device. If you're there, just click through the link to the full show notes. It'll take you to the blog post and you can find all these resources right there. See you in just a minute. The Spectra 1964 model was created by the missile engineers who are central in rolling out the systems that have protected the free world for over half a century. The extremely stable high-circuit design of the 101 amplifier provides unequaled headroom, low noise, and linear output, irrespective of transient audio peaks, giving you clearer, punchier, dynamic recordings. During the height of record making, the 101 preamp was the perfect choice to build consoles for Tom Dowd, Muscle Shoals, Stax Studios, Ardent Studios, and New York City Record Plant, bringing you the sounds of ZZ Top, Aerosmith, Bruce Springsteen, King Crimson, John Lennon, and so many more. The Spectra 1964 legacy is carried on today through Bill Cheney and Jim Romney. Now you can get that same sound in your studio with the STX 100 mic pre and STX 500 EQ. Add the Cinemag Transformer BBDI and the C610 comp limiter, and you can have a truly awesome sound. Go to Spectra1964.com to learn more or click the link in the show notes below. Are you using a Mac in your recording studio? Are you tired of feeling like the studio setup you worked so hard to create is becoming obsolete too quickly? Wouldn't it feel great to have a trusted friend to help you keep your existing Mac and studio setup current and relevant so that you can focus on the thing you love most, which is making great music? Well, now you can rely on OWC, Otherworld Computing, which you can find at OWC.com. whose mission it is to help you get the most mileage out of your Mac. Whether you need to upgrade your RAM, install an SSD, add more connectivity, or simply find a great used Mac that's ready to rock, OWC will help take your studio far into the future with a vast library of DIY install videos, 24/7 friendly support, and free shipping in the US on most items over $49. Why get frustrated and ditch your existing computer when you can take your studio far into the future with OWC? Learn more at OWC.com and find out how awesome your Mac can be at OWC. It was 1971 in a New York City basement when Eventide revolutionized the audio world by introducing the world's first studio effects processor, the Instant Phaser, and the first digital effect, the H910 Harmonizer. Eventide soon followed with the Instant Flanger, Omnipressor, SP2016 Reverb, and H949 and H3000 Harmonizers, which have been favorites of A-list mixers like Michael Brower, Joe Ciccarelli, Mick Guzowski, and Dave Pensato, and heard on countless hit records over the decades. Today, Eventide brings all that sound to your stage and studio with modern solutions like the H9000 Harmonizer, their complete line of guitar pedals, including the versatile H9 Max, and transformative plugins like Micropitch, Physion, Black Hole, and Mangled Reverb. Take your next mix in your studio to a whole new level. Go to eventide.com or click the link in the show notes below. Are you sick of bothering family and neighbors when you're just trying to rehearse or record your music? Do outside noises or computer fans get into your studio mics and ruin your recordings? You could book a pro studio to record every time, but that would add up quickly, and doing permanent construction to soundproof your studio can easily cost up to $100,000 or more. Trust me, I know. And you can't take that with you when you eventually move the studio. Don't you wish there was an easy solution right now? Whisper Room ISO Booths offers a simple way to install a comfortable, quiet, ventilated ISO booth in your studio with easy line of sight for recording vocals, guitar amps, or even drums in a variety of sizes. For 30 years, Whisper Room has been solving studio isolation needs worldwide with ISO booths that are shippable, portable, and can be assembled in an afternoon. Now you can get pro vocal recordings right in your home studio, practice whenever you want, and start using real guitar amps again. Get 10% off the 4x4 or 4x6 booths when you mention Recording Studio Rockstars at whisperroom.com or click the link in the show notes below. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Casey Barker, joining us from, where are you? Are you down at Paragon or are you down in Franklin or somewhere?
No, I purchased a house in Columbia, Tennessee in 2017.
Ooh,
so
Columbia, Tennessee.
I love it down here.
It's beautiful out there. Speaking of entrepreneurs, I know somebody who moved out there, John Meese.
Oh, yeah.
You know John?
Yeah, John and I are good. Yeah, John and I are friends.
Oh, that's a trip. Yeah, John and I were in our first mastermind group together.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, he's an awesome dude. He just had a baby.
But another one, I think, right?
So, I think this is yes, you're correct. Yes, another one. But yeah, we meet up on Wednesday mornings. There's like an entrepreneurial meetup.
Oh, that's very cool.
And it's amazing.
Small world. So we should clarify though, Rockstars. Before you're like, what is this creepy stuff they're talking about? It's like Illuminati stuff. Mastermind is a catch-all phrase for something that we should all be doing, which basically is saying, I'm going to find a core group of people that will, that I'm going to meet with regularly in a topic of interest to me. So maybe it's business, maybe it's family life and home stuff, maybe it's songwriting, maybe it's running your studio, and the goal is to give yourselves accountability and community around this thing that's really important to you, and it tremendously helps. So mine is sort of built around the podcast, and it's cool to hear that you're doing that with John. They're doing the mastermind for entrepreneurism. Is entrepreneurism a word?
Yeah, let's go with it.
All right, entrepreneurial pursuits.
I love it.
Cool, man. With that in mind, why don't we talk a little bit more about that? So one of the things that you started is something called modernmusicbusiness.com. Tell us what that is. What's the point? What are you trying to do there?
Yeah, the modern music business is there to be a resource for anyone who's looking at obtaining their dream job in the entertainment business. The tough thing about the entertainment business is that for many people who don't live in or near a major entertainment centric city, it's really hard to find out what this industry is like, what it's about, what the expectations, and circumstances of living a life doing this kind of stuff. And so modern music business is there to be a resource for anyone who's seriously pursuing an entertainment career so that they can get that insight that they can't get otherwise. I grew up in Northern Ohio, and as I was looking for information about what it would be like to be an engineer, producer, mixer, it was really hard to find from Northwestern Ohio. And it took me getting into the real world before it was like, whoa, wake up call. This is what this is actually like.
Yeah.
So modern music business is the opportunity to get that inside information that you're just not going to get anywhere else.
It's so true. The other funny part about it is you might be growing up in an area where you think there's nothing going on in music, and there might actually even be a lot going on in music that you didn't know about. So I grew up in Boston, and I decided to come down to Nashville to go to school for recording. I was so green about music. I knew so little. I didn't even know Nashville was a music city. I didn't even know it was one of the 3 major music hubs in the U.S.
Yeah, right.
I just found out about a school that was down here. I was like, that looks like a good school. I'll go there, And then in leaving Boston, it's now through doing the podcast and doing interviews with people that are up there and meeting people that I realized that I started out in basically a hotbed of great music and studios and production. And of course, New York's right around the corner too. So it's just sort of funny. But sorry, I digress. Continue, my friend.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, it's, speaking to that, I had, my room was, you mentioned Paragon a moment ago. And you probably did that because I had my room at Paragon for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And part of one of the perks of being there was that I was able to be a mentor to the interns that came through that facility. And I saw hundreds over the course of 4 years.
Yeah.
And one thing that was really heartbreaking for me was to...
That's a lot of interns, dude.
That's a lot. It's a lot. And what was the most heartbreaking part about that was seeing that people had gone through years of college and 6 months of an internship before they realized, oh, like this career has a lot of aspects to it that are deal breakers for me.
Right.
And so that's what modern music business was really there to correct is being able to guide people. You've been through this process. You've been able to navigate the ups and downs of the entertainment industry and build a long-term lucrative career in the entertainment business, but not everybody gets to do that.
It's what it is? It's the skill set of being too dumb to know when the music industry is telling you no over and over again.
Well, yeah, I certainly see that there's a certain element of truth to that, right? A thread of truth to that. But the other part of that too is I think it takes an element of, again, if we go back to assessment. I think anyone who's completely honest, who's been in this industry for a long enough period of time has been faced with that question, like, do I get out?
Yep.
And at the end of the day, I think guys like you, guys like myself, we look at our lives and go like, you know what, there's nothing else that we could do without being miserable in our life. And I think a lot of people maybe perhaps get into this industry without being at that point. They go, I need to do something with my life. This seems like would be fun. I think I'd enjoy this. And they don't, I'm speculating a little bit, but I don't think that they go much further than that. This looks like fun. I want to do this for a career. And then they get into the real world and go, okay, doing this professionally looks a lot different in the real world than what I thought it did in my head.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people, because I also have interns and I've seen the journey a bit, and I see some go on to do some pretty fantastic things in music.
Yeah.
And some maybe fade away, or I'm not sure what they're doing, or I just haven't heard from them again.
Right.
But I think sometimes the fadeaway is it's just the pressure of just like, I got to make some income. I've got to survive. I need a job kind of thing. And you have to be very careful how you address that if you want to be doing music and continue doing music,
That's exactly it. And I mean, that's what I was faced with in the first years of, being here, is the hardest part to overcome, I think, is being, especially in a highly entertainment concentrated town, is you've got a lot of people who have their sights set on the same goal, and that's your job,
right?
Or what you want to do. And so you have to figure out a way to cut through the noise and also, have longevity. Yeah. And that's a really hard combination of things to figure out.
And the funny thing is, somebody's it's all along the journey, somebody's looking at you and going, man, I really wish I had your gig. And you're like, you really wish you had my gig. Are you kidding? I'm still trying to get that gig over there.
Exactly. Right.
That's just the natural process of being human on this journey of trying to make a living doing music. I have a tough question for you.
Yeah.
If you don't mind. You
Sure.
said that modern music business is about, helping somebody find their dream job in audio. Mm-hmm. How do you know what your dream job in audio is?
I think that takes time. And again, if we're talking about assessment, I think this takes, I think it takes more research than what most of us put into it. Mm-hmm. I think it takes more research. I think what it takes is doing a deep dive into what our interests are, and not only finding out the things that interest us, but the details of what it's like to operate under that capacity.
Yeah. You're saying you don't just spill into the room?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's how a lot of us get here sometimes.
Yeah, one thing that I've mentioned, in a course that I have under modern music business is that, I love playing my guitar. Growing up, I actually considered going to conservatory for jazz guitar.
Nice.
But as where I stand today, I would not enjoy being put in a position where I had to play my guitar every day to make a living. And I think that's the differentiation between like the knee-jerk reaction of this is my interest and I think I want to do this, versus doing the research or doing the deep dive and understanding what it's like to actually work that capacity day in, day out, turning something that you like to do into something that you have to do for a living.
All right, I got a question for you about that.
Yeah.
John Scofield or Joe Pass?
Oh, John Scofield.
All right, take it. Me too.
Yeah.
Both actually is the real answer.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's true. I was spending a lot of John Scofield in my high school and early college years.
Pat Metheny?
Yeah. Not as much, but I do enjoy it for sure.
Nice.
Especially like watching like the live shows.
Yeah, I got to see him on the Song X tour, which was pretty wild. It was a very bizarre thing to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was an acoustic drum kit, an electric drum kit, an acoustic bass, an electric bass, an acoustic guitar, an electric guitar. It's like there was just multiples of everything.
I mean, that's what I like about Pat Metheny is you get a little bit of everything. John Scofield set is fairly kind of what it is. Where Metheny's there's a lot of stuff on stage.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Okay, one more name drop. I think it was Robert Hunter, who I saw here playing in a local club. And it was just so cool. 7-string guitar.
Oh, I haven't seen him.
Yeah, I think unless I'm messing the name up. Correct me if I'm wrong, rock stars. But all right, enough digressing, Lidge. Jazz guitar. So you looked at that and did you see that despite you wanting to do that wasn't the path for you?
That's correct, yeah. It's I think what I was looking for and hunting for back then was an excuse to do what I enjoy for a living. And I think that was just not the right thing. Around that time, I actually took a trip out to Oregon because that's where my mother was living at the time. And I was playing one of my songs that I wrote in a Guitar Center just because I was bored one day. Mm-hmm. Wanted to just get out. You're visiting, you're limited on what you can do and where you can go. So I went to a Guitar Center and went to the acoustic room, and a guy approached me and said, "Hey, I have a decent home studio. Would you like to come and record?" And so I went out and recorded, and that's when the aha moment for me was like, oh my gosh, like there's people that do this for a living.
Right.
Yeah, which was, again, you said something similar before. It's like, I should have known that, back then, that, like people record things for a living. That's how we hear things on, radio. But I never even thought about it.
Yeah, that was me too. I started out with a little bit of music, but I went to school for architecture, did 4 years of that, pursuing something that seemed like this is a real career choice kind of thing. Meanwhile, I never really wanted to do it that badly, but while I was there, I played in bands and really loved discovering music and playing guitar, but I just thought it was fun.
Yeah.
And then I got the opportunity to see the inside of a real studio, and all of a sudden it just hit me like a brick. I was like, whoa, when I go back home, this is what I want to do. I was traveling at the time. Yeah. And I was like, I got to go check this thing out. I didn't know this was a thing.
Yeah. I mean, I had been a musician all my life, and that's when that was the click moment for me. It was like, okay, I can have the artistic and the technical all at the same time. And it was like, this is what I want to do.
And imagine how much time I would have saved and how much more of a head start. I would have gotten a head start by another 4 or 5 years if I had done a little bit of research and exploration. I know that was a challenge for me. My dad always wanted to, he understood that I needed to meet people in the industry, and but I always sort of was rebelled against that. I guess I was just a kid.
Right. Yeah. And that's, for me growing up, my parents were vehemently against the entertainment business.
Nice.
And so
dude.
they were
vehemently in there with ironically and Quagmire. I think
anything that I can throw out there to make me sound smarter than what I really am.
Well, you're making me sound smarter too. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So your parents were totally against it?
Yeah, and so they were trying to push me in completely opposite directions. They wanted me to look at HVAC and automotive and medical and all that kind of stuff. It was very, very interesting.
Now you just have to call HVAC a lot because you own a studio.
Yeah, exactly right.
And you're like, why do these people in medical get paid so well?
Yeah, exactly. That's true.
Okay, cool. So now that we've been going in wild circles, which is, it's my fault because this is what I do on this show. What should we talk about next? We've got modern music business. Now, I know that you've created some pretty fantastic free resources for people too that the rock stars may want to go check out. One of them was the Songwriter's Home Studio Primer and Buyer's Guide. I saw that on your website. And I wondered if you wanted to share any tips for starting a home studio on a budget here on the podcast as well.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me, I would say starting out, is the technology is getting so good. And the mic preamps have come up in quality. I think the biggest thing starting a home studio is not to go absolutely bananas starting off. I think that there's a lot of people that want to kind of go nuts.
Yeah, save that for the solo.
Yeah, exactly. Take your time and get your feet wet, get some experience, get learned a bit before you start stepping up in the high tier stuff. Because quite frankly, you can spend $400 now on a USB-C interface, and they're going to sound pretty stinking good.
Yeah.
Especially compared to when I was getting started. Firewire interfaces and USB interfaces sound like absolute garbage.
Oh yeah, I've still got a MBox One sitting up on the shelf there, and it was pretty amazing that it worked, but it didn't sound all that great.
Yeah, the preamps back in the day, they were completely sterile, uninspiring. They've come a long way. And so it's more, I learned a lot in the early stages by, my first interface was a PreSonus FirePod.
Mm-hmm.
It did not sound good, but it got my feet wet. And, that gave me such an edge over everyone else in my career. Just because I was able to get in, record, start micing stuff, figure out what works, what doesn't, learn the DAWs, at least, get the concepts down.
Yeah.
It's just important to
I think
get your feet wet.
One of the encouraging things about what you're saying that's implicit is it's that reminder that the most valuable piece of studio gear that you've got, Rockstars, is you.
That's right.
And so like, rather than focusing outwardly on, I got to have gear, I got to have these tools or else I can't do it. Yes, sure, you need some tools for sure. I mean, you're not gonna hammer a nail in with the palm of your hand,
right,
into a 2x4. You are going to need a hammer, but you don't need an air hammer. What do they call them? Nail gun. You don't need a nail gun. Yeah, pneumatic nail gun. And it's that the sooner you focus on your skill set and the process of learning and the process of trying things and doing them wrong and then figuring out what works and what doesn't work, the faster you're going to get to the point of making stuff that really is, great, really effective. So yeah, continue. But I like that you're reminding us of that.
Well, yeah, and to prove, I'm sure J.R. McNeely. Are you familiar with him?
I'm not sure.
Well, he has this YouTube channel, and he makes it a point. And he's a very, very talented mixer, insanely talented mixer. But he has a YouTube channel where his primary point is he does these covers using the cheapest garbage gear that he can find, and this stuff sounds amazing, like absolutely amazing. And that just kind of fits into the point that you just made, is that once you've developed the talent and the skill, and you can get away with doing some really incredible stuff with some pretty budget-friendly equipment.
Yeah, I totally agree. I know from my experience, I was coveting gear, and for at least a decade, I pretty much spent every penny that I made just buying new gear. I'd just be on eBay and I just get something new and I just buy it. And, I never saved anything. And then finally, that kind of crashed and burned that segment of my career. And I came home to start my home studio.
Yeah.
And at that point, it was like, there's no more money, dude. Stop spending anything. Use what you got. And it was the process of recording and just sticking to the tools I already had that was most transformative for me. Like my work excelled just by saying, I'm just going to learn the different ways to use this one mic over I need to try every mic in order to get the right answer.
Right. Yeah, and I imagine that you've probably covered this a million times over the course of this podcast. But I mean, I knowing, where the questions that could, that could come across my way on this podcast, I knew that if you were going to ask me about microphones, like any types of mic, my answer is always, there is no holy grail mic.
Right.
I've used vintage U47s on people that have sounded just absolute garbage.
Oh, I've made the most expensive gear sound terrible. We did a mix session at Blackbird Studio A, and we went in there with a song, and we had 4 days. We booked 4 days in Studio A, and we had any kind of gear that we could choose. And the problem was we chose it all. We literally said like, well, we don't know what to put on the kick, so we'll try everything until we pick the one we like the most. And we went one by one down every channel, and we got to the end, and the whole thing just sounded like total crap. And they finally, and I talked with Vance Powell about this because he was studio manager during that, and he finally had to kick us out of the studio on a Sunday morning at 8 a.m. when I think a Christian music session was coming in to record, and we had been up all night trying to like print our mix and get it right, and it was all just wasted.
Wow. Yeah, it's I jumped off of the gear train a little while ago because it was being proven over and over and over again that dollar signs does not equal quality in a lot of. Sometimes it does. There's certainly crap out there, but generally speaking, any decent quality thing is going to work on something. It's figuring out what combination of microphone works right on which source. Yeah,
we don't buy records for the gear that was used on them. We buy them for the music that's on them.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. So let's see. So where did that leave us? Where should the Rockstars go check out your download for that?
Yeah, if they go to www.modernmusicbusiness.com, they all they have to do is scroll halfway down the page, and my opt-ins are there. The free resources.
Okay, great.
And there's the home studio buyer's guide. There is a entertainment profession outline, which is a 38-page ebook that covers a lot of the predominant jobs and roles in entertainment. And I'm talking about music, television, and film.
Great. So it's that easy to start getting some answers right now where, like, if you're wondering what to do and you need to do a little research, literally go download this first.
Exactly. And that's kind of what that was there for, is an initial bit of research. I haven't mentioned it yet, but next week I'm going to do my best to get my 1-hour free webinar live.
Nice.
And it is going to be a 1-hour in-depth, essentially coaching mentorship on what to do in the first stages of trying to research and be decisive about what you want to do in your career. I'm going to talk about, how to do that research, where to do that research. I'm going to give resources on where you can find out what these job roles are, and using resources like IMDb and AllMusic, and just to find out who is working on the stuff that you love.
Yeah. All things I knew nothing about until I've discovered them one day,
Tell me about it. Yeah. I mean, back when I was getting started, I had no idea that, AllMusic was a thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be, 1 hour webinar that's just resource rich. That'll leave you with a plan on how to get started and moving forward into obtaining this dream career in entertainment.
Good deal. Good deal. Now, let me ask you this question pertaining to one of the other downloads that you have there. So what tips do you want to share with us now on the show for being more productive with your creativity?
It really comes down to just being prepared. The ebook that I have on there about powerhouse productivity steps is it really goes over what you and I would do on a typical tracking day, is spending your time getting your mic set up, doing your line checks, getting everything, all your ducks in a row, so that when you go to sit down and you would do a work tape or do a demo, or take an idea that you have in your head and put it down on tape, that you're not jumping through a bunch of technical hurdles in the process.
Yep.
Nothing will siphon your productivity and your creativity like sitting down going, okay, I'm ready to go, and then hitting the space bar in your DAW, and then the tempo's wrong and the click track doesn't sound the way that you want to, and you got to stop and you got to do all the stuff, or you haven't created the tracks. That's the biggest thing, is sitting down so that when you get that creative spark, you are absolutely ready to go, and you don't have to jump through any technical hurdles.
I can't even wait long enough between strumming a chord on the guitar and liking the way it sounds to swiping 5 different ways into my phone to find the recording app and press record to capture that idea.
Yeah,
even that's too long.
I know, absolutely.
Most of the time.
I can't tell you how many times I've been, you get that song idea in your head, and this was before, this was before I was using like voice memos on my phone.
Yep.
And running to my room and, plugging everything in. And like, by the time I get to record, I'm like, oh, what was that idea again?
Yeah, exactly.
What was that melody?
Fleeting. That's going to be the name of my record. Fleeting.
I love it.
Want to record killer drums in your home studio? Then check out Rockstars of Drums to learn how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a professional Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Or if you're ready to start mastering your own records at home, then check out Rockstars of Mastering, where I walk you through exactly how I mastered my own records skadoosh using nothing but plugins in PreSonus Studio One. And if mixing is your focus, then check out my free course Mixmaster Bundle, where I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is these techniques would work for you in whichever DAW you're using right now. Plus, you get a look at how I recorded everything in my studio and multi-track downloads for you to practice mixing and even include in your mixing portfolio if you want. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to Mixmaster Bundle to get started for free now, or look for the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Awesome. Well, let's jump into some let's jump into some questions about some of the records you've done too.
Yeah.
So we have a YouTube playlist with some examples of your work. The Journey track, City of Hope, is on there, and you shared a great story about working with those guys.
Yeah.
There's another one called Jesus is Live, the Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir.
Yeah.
And I have a question about that. So it just looks like a massive production. And when you really look in close at the choir, you're like, good Lord, every single one of those people in the choir is holding a wireless microphone. And so my thought but yet the mix really sounds coherent. It's all together. The singer is up front, and the band sounds powerful.
Yeah.
So my question is, how do you keep it all straight and make it sound like a focused mix in a band when you just have that much chaos or potential for chaos?
Yeah, that was a big production. I think they spent right around $250,000 on that. Between the record and the production trucks, because the production trucks that they used to film that were like the ones that they would park, that like ESPN would use and park out in front of a stadium to cover a football game.
Nice.
They spent, it was a big deal. It was a trick. And obviously there's a lot of production tricks that were involved in that. Yes, pretty much everyone in the front row had a wireless mic, and we were recording all of those. So that church actually has a recording studio upstairs. I'm misspeaking a little bit. They have a room, a control room upstairs. We had to rent a lot of gear.
It probably has like a red net feed or something from downstairs.
So yeah, it's actually just got a bunch of snakes pouring out the wall.
Okay, all right,
and so and it is essentially just a copy of the stage box downstairs. It's like a split or a mult.
Yeah.
And so I rented a ton of gear, racks and racks of CL1Bs and Vintex and all that kind of stuff. And actually rented a Midas console too, just kind of for the extra auxiliary stuff.
Yeah, I love the Midas.
where we couldn't use boutique, and so a lot of the rhythm track was tracked in Nashville. So the band, the rhythm was played there. It depends. Some of it was there because there were string elements and orchestral elements that were in that record that were tracked here.
Interesting. So the music may have been pre-recorded, and then the choir is able to sing to it in the live thing?
Well, yeah. The I misspoke about the rhythm because I've done 2 records with them. One was a studio record, and one was a live. And I think you're referring to the live.
Yeah. And I'm just like in the question, just generally speaking, or like, what are some cool ways to take that big live stuff going on and still make it sound great as a mixed recording?
Yeah. Yeah, as far as the live recording goes, the band was tracked there and at the church. The orchestra, any of the orchestra elements were pre-recorded in Nashville.
Okay.
Because there's just no place, there's no room in the church to put them. The other production trick to that was that, a lot of that choir that you hear on the record we captured them live on the performance with a set of room mics, but we also captured them beforehand with, spot mics, soprano, alto, tenor, bass mics, and a Decatree, and a bunch of other things.
Cool. So that's, again, it's that remembering that there are clever solutions to, making a combination of what actually happens in a live thing and what can enhance it through a studio.
Absolutely.
Recording.
Because, when you got cameras and all that sort of stuff and jibs flying everywhere, unfortunately, you just can't throw a bunch of mics everywhere you want.
Right.
And so without ruining the production.
Nothing brings a Decatree down quicker than a crane camera swooping across the front.
That would make for a great YouTube outtake, though.
It would.
But yeah, so that was kind of how we solved that aspect of it. And so, the record that you hear and the stuff that you see on YouTube is a combination of the live mics, the room mics that we recorded the day of the concert, and some of the pre-recorded choir.
Yeah.
That we recorded beforehand. And the biggest thing about, mixing a record with that high of a track count is, a lot of things can start getting blown over really quick.
Mm-hmm.
And so the biggest thing is you can't, unfortunately, like it's not like a rock record where you can kind of push everything like really hard left and right and everything sounds big and cool. You start doing this with the choir and stacks of choir and orchestra, everything's going to start getting buried on top of each other.
Mm-hmm.
So panning becomes a really big thing when you're talking about stacks of choir.
So like a little bit of panning to the left, a little more, like panning different things out carefully.
Yeah, it's, maybe you're pushing, the orchestra stuff really hard out left and right, and then you're bringing the choir in a touch, a little bit more towards center.
Mm-hmm.
Especially on a live show where, video is still going to drive a lot of your perception of what you hear. So if you're watching a video of the choir and they're right front center stage and you're pushing them out hard left and right, well, visually that doesn't cohere with what you're seeing or hearing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. You need to, there's that combination of needing to match what you're seeing in the camera.
Yes.
But also make sure that the mix holds together. You can't just put anything wherever the camera shot is because it may not be the best place for it sonically.
Correct. Yes. Correct. Yeah. Because ultimately it is a record too. So it still has to play well in both scenarios, but it's one of those things where, where the orchestra is not represented visually, you can kind of do whatever you want with that.
Right. Good point.
But with the choir, you want to keep it a little bit closer to center. One, because it is going to help create that clarity between the orchestra and the choir. Because sonically, if we're talking about frequency range too, those two things are kind of absorbing the same frequency space in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to be really careful about that too.
And if you have a guitar player who's on the right side of the stage, you probably need to pan them to the right in the mix. With this one, it was really tough. You just kind of have to pick a spot because there are so many different angles. Yeah.
That you can't, you just kind of had to pick one there. I
know, that's one of those frustrating things. You match one, it looks so great in that shot, and then the shot switch is like, oh no, what do I do now?
Yeah, right.
Well, that's cool. Now, what about, obviously you probably can't re-record the drums on something like that. Although maybe you could, I don't know. But there probably are some other good tricks that you can do to the drums to make them sound better than just a bunch of like splatty close mics.
Yeah, there was definitely a world of drum augmentation, done on that. They've done a really good job of creating a really nice drum cage there.
At that church?
At that church, and their drummer, Mike Algerbald, is a legit drummer too. He's
nice.
Very, very good. As you can tell from the production, they tend not to spare any expense. They're all about allowing their talented people to do what they do best, and they try not to do anything to restrict them. And that's something I really appreciate about the Brooklyn Tabernacle. But all that to say, because of that, they actually had some pretty amazing stuff, there as far as gear and mics and stuff like that on the drum kit. So
what are some go-to tricks for enhancing the drums that the rock stars should consider? Like if they find themselves with a live recording and the drums sound a little lackluster when they get back to the studio, what are some things to explore?
Drum augmentation is obviously, we're all used to hearing that. So that's kind of like a staple of working with that. One thing that I like to do, especially like in a live scenario, is I will try to do everything I can to, especially like in a drum cage like that, is take the drum kit and figure out a way to put the entire kit in a space, even if it's a verb. Like I'll even use the reverb space that actually comes with Pro Tools. Or some type of impulse response based thing where I can actually do my best to put the drum kit, the entire kit, in a space. And it doesn't have to be over the top or whatever. It just needs to do the job of taking it out of this close, isolated cage.
Right. You need to start, it's almost like close your eyes a little bit and listen. You'll be like, does that sound like, can I visualize the space that's in front of me as I'm listening to this?
Right. And the thing is, like, the drum samples have gotten so good. I've done, things in the past where I've really isolated just the frequencies I needed of the snare. If it's a crappy snare, and put that down as a duplicate track. So just that part of the snare cuts through, or just that part of the kick. Maybe most of the kick is garbage. It has no low end, but it snaps good. The top end, snaps really good.
Right.
Or has, I'll still utilize that, and augment with samples. So I've got the low end. There's a lot of different tricks you can do, but that's just a couple.
I think one reminder is that when the snare or the kick just don't sound that good and the samples sound much better, then maybe the thing we want to keep and extract from the live kick and snare is whatever elements just make it sound expressive.
Yeah.
And if it's not great sounding, as long as it adds the expression of the drums to it, then maybe we can lean on those samples if we want to, or if we need to, rather.
Well, and the one thing that I started doing early on when it comes to drum augmentation is that in the early days I was using Massey's DRT. I don't know if you've had any experience with that one or not.
I totally know it. I never really started using it, but I know it. It basically took the drums and would convert them to MIDI notes for you, right? So you could re-trigger things?
That's correct. But the best thing about that, and actually Stephen Slate has done this even better now, but is that you could use the 127 velocities of MIDI to dynamically adjust the volume of your samples. The cool thing now is with a lot of the new triggering plugins is that it can see the MIDI and it'll actually trigger a different sample based on the level of MIDI that it sees.
Right.
So it's not just a volume adjustment, it's actually dynamically changing the sample that is triggered.
Yeah.
And you can get crazy dynamic with samples now, utilizing that.
Was it Drum Replacer?
Technique.
Was that the early one too for Audio Suite that used to let you do like 3 different samples?
It was 3 different samples, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Huge variation.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes, right.
Cool, man. All right. Well, let me jump forward to another question for you. Another band you worked with, Emerson Drive.
Mm-hmm.
The 2 things that really leapt out at me, which makes a lot of sense because we talk about it all the time in country production, is the vocals and the snare.
Yeah.
So I wondered if you wanted to talk about, if somebody said like, how do you get that country vocal sound? And then how do you get that crisp, clear snare happening?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot of limiting. There for a long time in my career, I was all about compression. To get that sound, to get that, the thing is compression. And the interesting thing is when you think about compression is the job of a compressor is when it works, it reduces gain. It reduces volume. Where when using a limiter, it's, it can do some gain reduction, but its sole purpose is to push. When you're pulling down your limiter, it's trying to push the level up to the ceiling. Yeah.
Well, especially with the auto gain threshold limiters. So I guess when we first saw limiters, they were literally just like you just clamp down on stuff. But RVox, things like that, which I'm not sure if RVox is a limiter, but I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's the one that I really like using now is, I'm a big fan of FabFilter stuff in general.
Yeah.
I have almost everything that they make. But the Avid Pro stuff is really quite sensational. And they've got a really incredible limiter. And so, that's one thing that I will always, I'm almost strapping a limiter across almost everything anymore. Which sounds completely wrong. But when it comes to like a modern loud production, it's amazing what clamping down, and getting a limiter to bite down on a vocal, bite down on a snare, bite down on a kick will do in the mix. Man, it makes it scream and it's awesome.
I'm kind of constantly surprised when I try that. Like I might have a snare and I'm like, man, this snare is just not happening. What is it about it? And then I might what if I just put a limiter on it and I do it? I'm like, well, that sounds awesome. Why does that sound awesome?
Yeah, it sounds like it should not work. And I struggle with that again in the earlier parts of my career is trying the things that intuitively I think are wrong rather than just going, screw it, I'm going to try it and see how it sounds.
Well, I think part of why limiters sometimes work, so there's the auto gain version like you said, but even if I just took like the Dynamics plugin in Pro Tools and put it in limiting mode and started clamping down on the snare, I might like it more. Sometimes our struggle in a mix is not that we need to make things sound louder, but that there are things poking out too much that are just distracting us, and we need to slam it down so that it doesn't poke out so much.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's where I like to, implement some sort of multiband compressor.
Yeah.
That will just start to, sometimes I'll even let things slip through a little bit in the early stages of a mix, knowing that if it's got the general feel and the sound that I want, but there's just this one thing, I'll let it push through and I'll let a multiband grab it somewhere later down the road. Because the thing is, you don't want to, when you do a notch in an EQ, you're pulling that frequency away all the time.
Yep.
And that might not work. That might not be the thing. And putting multiband in place, it's like, okay, it'll grab the things that I don't like when it gets a little too out of control.
Okay, all right. This is sparking a new idea for a series of questions on the podcast. Describe multiband compression using one word.
One word.
Yeah.
One word.
What's the first word that comes to mind when you think about multiband compression? You're like, taco.
Yeah.
Because this interview is going long and it's late and it's dinner time.
Yeah, multiband compression. In one word.
For me, it's smooth.
Ooh, that's a good one. You may have stolen it from me.
Well, it's all right. We can share it.
Yeah. That's about right though. That's about right.
Or tame.
Yeah, I mean, I was yeah. I had a lot of things that was coming through my mind, but none of them were one word.
I know it's a tough one. I've never asked anybody. Thanks for being a guinea pig with my new question.
That's a.
What about how about compression?
Squish.
Nice. I was thinking excitement too. But I mean, what's funny about that is that does. We're all like painters with, we've all got the same colors in the rainbow, but we think of them differently and we use them differently, which is cool,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, now what about that? So limiting was sort of the answer to that country vocal sound, the clear, crisp snare. Obviously you need to start with somebody who can sing with that sound.
Yes.
Who's got that? What are some other things that you might run into? Maybe pick one other thing you might run into that needs to be addressed in getting a very pro vocal, as you're going into the mix. So like not everything is a tweak at the mix. Sometimes it's just making sure that it's like there's nothing wrong. Getting it right means there's nothing wrong left in the track or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, so one thing that drives me nuts, that I hear a lot of, and this may or may not be answering your question, but it's something that sparked when you asked that question, is that I hear a lot of tracks that don't have the proper cleanup done on them.
Right. No, that's kind of what I was getting at too.
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
Yeah. One of my favorite tools once I'm in the DAW is Isotope RX7 Advanced.
Yeah.
Again, coming from the post-production world has enlightened me to a lot of workflow improvements that work really, really well in the music world. But one of those things is I hear tracks with, spit in them and, all that kind, you hear someone moves their tongue and you can hear the spit kind of clacking in their mouth.
Yep.
I hear tracks with that stuff all the time and it drives me absolutely bananas. And addressing the breaths and, or over compressing the breaths. There's just a lot of stuff in there that I personally like to make sure are in line before I even start a mix on a vocal.
So are you suggesting that our favorite famous singers, even they are human and have things like spit and breaths and weird stuff that is on the vocal track?
It's yes. It's especially now. It's funny because one thing that I do a lot of is I do a lot of vocal tuning.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in today's era of music, I don't care how good you are, like you are not exempt from Melodyne, or whatever. Right. Insert tuning, there's very, very few occasions where it's like, okay, we're not going to tune this. We're not going to touch this at all.
Now, sometimes that question comes up and, might come up in the studio and I find myself awkwardly bringing up tuning. And then the conversation takes a wrong turn and a detour where it becomes like argument for or against tuning. And then I'm reminded by some people, it's like, oh, no, they're like, you asked the artist? And I'm like, what do you don't?
Right.
It's just that question of like, is Melodyne something that needs to be discussed? Kind of like when you were mixing with all the producers in the back of the room, they're like, why do you keep asking us questions and looking at us?
Right.
Or is it something that is just in our toolkit and we just do what we're going to do and we present it to them, and if they don't like it or don't like it, we address it?
Yeah, my personal stance is that I'll just come out and say it. Hey, you want me to tune this? Do you want me to tune this? And most artists are like, yes, please.
Right.
But
some artists don't know. They've never answered a question like that before.
Yeah, right. And if I have to
they might need it the most.
Yeah, and if I have to explain it, it's like, oh well, if there's any pitchy areas, then I can fix that. Do you want me to do that? And then there's an artist that I've worked with what you were talking about. Like he was vehemently against. I use that word again. See that?
There you go. That's twice.
Yeah, man, it's so good. He was so against tuning, but the producer was like, no, you're tuning that vocal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kind of did it. And, the next day the artist came back and he's like, man, you hear that? I nailed that vocal.
That's great.
I was like, yeah, you did.
That's great. And we shan't name names, rock stars.
Right. It happens.
It wasn't Bob Dylan. Okay, so these are awesome, man. These are awesome. So we are coming near the end here. Let me jump to some of our closing questions.
Sure.
When you started out in recording, what do you feel like was holding you back?
I think a lot of the same things that are holding a lot of people back is diving into an industry where everybody's aiming for the same thing, and figuring out how to find your place, figure out how to essentially become your own business, because that's what we're doing. I mean, the majority of this industry is freelance, and so you've got to, it's figuring out, how do I hustle? How do I find work? How do I interact with people? What are the areas of etiquette that I need to improve on, or how do I need to improve my personality so that I'm a welcome presence wherever I go? So it's those kind of things and it was, the business side too, is, having, I got walked over a lot in the early years of my career. I got pushed.
I hate to say it, dude, but you look like a rug. I mean, what did you expect?
I know. It's especially back then, because, I look like a prepubescent little boy, and so like no one took me seriously.
I look pretty kooky. People used to say I had elf boots. That's what kind of shoes I wore. Now, of course, I wear no shoes.
I love that. So yeah, it was all of those things of building up my confidence and being able to stand up for myself and find work and just kind of make a living as a freelancer in a highly competitive industry.
Some of the best advice you remember receiving?
Well, there's been several. Randy Poole is one of them, and one of the things that he said is, when it comes to being in the studio, being with your clientele, you always have to put on the perception that you are always in control. Like, even if the console is on fire, they hired you because they trust that you know what you're doing, that you can control the situation, and you need to be able to have that perception that you've got them.
Yeah, that's when you tell me, like, yeah, dude, it's because you nailed that note, man. This track is smoking.
Right.
All right. So that's great. I love that. Recording tip, hack, or secret sauce, something that the rock stars could use on their next session today.
I'm a big fan of the double miking the snare. A couple things. I'm a big fan of double miking the snare. One with probably a 57, and with a pencil condenser taped to the side.
Dig it.
And not on the hi-hat side.
How would you choose the right pencil condenser if you had to choose between them? I'm
a big fan of like the Cam 184. We might have to put a pad on it, like an inline pad for it. There's That's probably one of the better ones.
What should we expect to hear? Should we hear two mics that sound similar or two mics that sound different?
Two mics that sound different. And the biggest thing you got to check is that you got to test the snare hit to make sure that they're both in phase, that they're perfectly in phase.
Otherwise, you won't get anything.
yeah. Then you're creating problems for yourself. But the cool thing about having condenser is that it is going to, typically the capsules of a condenser are a bit more sensitive than a dynamic microphone, and so you get a bit more smack. You hear a little bit more of that attack, and you capture a little bit more of that than you will in the 57. And yeah, it gives you a whole nother option of what you can blend and mix, when come mix time, with your snare. The other thing that I love to do is, when it comes to guitar cabs, everyone's all about the 57. The SM7 is my favorite guitar cab mic of all time.
Dig it. I got to use mine more often.
It's super cool. It's, because a lot of people are like, well, it's got the same capsules of 57. It's basically the same mic. It's not the same mic. There's a reason why one can be had for like $90 and the other one's $350.
Yeah. They're
very, very different microphones, but the SM7 does have a lot of like that 57 character on a cabinet without that, like, that 2 to 4K bite.
Mm-hmm.
And it does a very, very cool thing on guitar cabs.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that. Well, so let me go to a closing question here because our time is up. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine. You're going to go back in time, find young Casey Barker.
Yes.
Who's like just figuring out his E flat 913 add 7 chord and like trying to figure out how to loop this section of a solo and slow it down to half speed. And you say, listen, Casey, I've come back to give you this bit of brilliant insight. I've become so much more brilliant than I used to be. And here's the single most important thing you need to know to become a recording studio rock star yourself.
Yeah.
What advice would you go back and give yourself if you could?
Oh man, I would say pay really close attention to the market and what's happening in the market. Back then I was so...
You mean like the farmer's market?
Yes. Yeah. Because those farm raised vegetables and fruits are so delicious.
Hey.
And you can only get them on Sunday usually or Saturday. So you got to really...
You had 7 seasons of them.
That's right. No, just what, when I got into the music industry, I wasn't even paying attention to the market or the fact that the music industry was kind of doing this downward dive ever since the year 2000.
Yeah, tell me about it.
And if I could have gone back, I would have told myself I'd still certainly be in music. The passion runs too deep to not, but I would have paid more attention about what is happening in my industry and learn to pivot sooner. And whether that means figuring out an area of the industry that's monetizing really well or figuring out how to become a mentor or a guide for the up-and-coming artists so that I can give them a better game plan on how to move forward and monetize on their craft. It could have been a million different things. But I think that would have been one thing. The other thing that I would say is that would be to never assume that any one gig or opportunity is necessarily going to make or break your career.
Right.
That there are a lot of different pathways to success. And I remember being so paralyzed by fear that if I move or if I go do this other thing or step away from this opportunity, that I'm going to be a failure in my career.
Yeah.
And nothing was further from the truth. And I've mentored many people since then that, are in like staff positions at a studio or whatever, and they're just terrified to leave, and I would tell them like, look, there's a world out there outside of the studio. Like you can make a living.
Well,
you can go out there and get it.
For me, my similar thing was leaving the major label record making world and coming back and just saying, I'm just going to start my home studio and just make it happen here. And it was scary as hell, but it's been so much better.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the people who are truly driven and motivated, they will find a way.
Yeah.
I'm convinced of it.
That's awesome, dude. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast with us. What a great hang, man. I know we only met for 2 minutes, but we made up for it by talking for 2 hours just now. Let the rock stars know how they can find you online and learn more about you and your music. How can they learn more about modern music business? And where can they go pick up some of these great free resources that you put out there for us?
Yeah, you can head over to modernmusicbusiness.com. You can also find me on Facebook, facebook.com/modernmusicbusiness. And my personal, handles are usually KC_Barker_mixing. At least that's for Instagram. And the others would be Cbarks, CBARX. And so that would probably be for my Facebook page. So,
Cbarks.
Yeah, Cbarks.
Did you start a band with CeeLo? Use CeeLo and Cbarks?
It was funny. It was actually, I got that nickname from my brother's college in Cincinnati. So, because my last name is Barker. So they would call my brother, Old Dirty J Barks. And then when I would come to visit, they're like, oh, there's young dirty Cbarks. And so it kind of stuck.
That's great, man. Remember to wash behind your ears.
That's right.
Dude, awesome, man. Thanks so much for hanging with us. I look forward to seeing you in person in the studio. And who knows, maybe I'll come join you guys for a Wednesday lunch thing or something like that one day.
Please
out
do.
in Columbia. Very cool, man.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, dude. We'll see you around soon.
All right.
Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Thanks so much for listening to this episode, Rockstars. I also want to give a big thank you to our sponsors who helped make this episode possible: OWC, Whisper Room, Eventide Audio, Spectra 1964, and Roswell Pro Audio. You'll find links to all these wonderful sponsors in our show notes. These are all things that I highly recommend you check out for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Cheers.